Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Today is, what is the 24th of June? The last Monday of the month of June.
Happy June T4th.
I don't know if that, yes, thank you. Today is June 24th. And it's a great Monday because it's been hot lately. So hopefully you're staying cool. Today's episode will help you stay cool, though. I couldn't connect it. I'm so sorry. So last week, we told you that we have a new member on our podcast team, Steven Spielberg himself. And I think he did an excellent job in editing in the absence of our normal editor, who is Brian, who is still recovering.
You should say something to Brian. Wish him a well recovery.
Brian, I hope you're doing well. We are all praying for you. That's kind of me. You know, I realized that when we record this podcast, I think people really think that I'm like a cocky guy. Because it's a joke. It's all a joke. But maybe people don't know that I'm joking. Because like, you know, like if a handsome person is joking about being handsome, like it just seems cocky. And not as a joke. So I'm not going to joke about that stuff anymore. Handsomeness, like intellect, skill, that kind of thing. Anyway, Steven Spielberg is no longer on the editing team with us as of this week. Instead, we have Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese. That's what we have. So today, we do not have Martin. We do not have Steven Spielberg with us. We have Martin Scorsese. So we will be discussing the topic of excellence. What does that mean? Excellent question. You are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang. We have with us Pastor Eugene Chunsuk and your boy Martin. Martin Scorsese, right there, in the flesh. And today we are recording an episode on the topic of excellence. You might think, you know, what a broad and interesting topic. And I think you'll find that the topic of excellence is something that is very near and dear to all of us. I think all of us have a relationship with excellence. We either worship it or we hate it. We either pursue it and punish ourselves when we don't achieve it, or we don't even try in the first place. I think many, if not all people, have a love-hate relationship with excellence. And you know, on the one hand, we have the perfectionist. On the other, we have the participation trophy. And, you know, of course, I'm just being kind of very extreme and just playing the opposites to get some good sound bites from our producer, Martin. And but we all have a relationship with excellence.
Is he a producer or a director?
I don't know what he is. What are you? Oh, he's an editor?
Yeah, the Big E.
Biggie. Yeah. So, I mean, today we want to talk about, speaking of E, we want to talk about excellence. And, you know, just kind of how does a Christian view excellence? What is the purpose of excellence? Do we have to be excellent in what? In everything? Like, do I have to be amazing at League of Legends?
No, you don't have to be excellent at all.
But
otherwise, you will be in danger of legalism. So, podcast over. You can't be a legalist, so don't be excellent.
But isn't there like a way that you don't have to be legalist?
There is the way, or the way.
Da way. Speaking of Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, I can't think of like a funny name with any other directors though.
Who's a famous director?
Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'll think of something for you. But talking about back to excellence, speaking of Nolan, is there such a thing as a mediocre Christian? And so these are some of the topics that I wanted to discuss, but to just lay some groundwork before us this morning. Should we want to be excellent as Christians, and why?
I already said no.
So you this is not the direction that I had anticipated.
Yeah.
Wait, can you answer the question? That's it? That's the end of the podcast? I have a lot of different things.
No, I think that's the danger that people kind of see. What I hear a lot now is we should be more afraid of being legalistic in our faith journey than anything else now. Oh, you legalists, because you're so, Bible this, Bible that. You won't allow for other interpretations. You won't allow for your umbrella to be big enough to catch all these other people who want to be part of the evangelical circle, but because you're so legalistic, and I think that's what people are more concerned about. So instead of excellence, what do we value in modern day evangelistic circles? I think we value empathy more. So it's a different E word, empathy over excellence. And for some reason, those two have been pitted against each other. So if you're empathetic, you can't really go for excellence, because if you go for excellence, then you must be legalistic or a bigot or a racist. And I really think that hopefully people see that this is now being turned on its head, because if you really think that if you're going for excellence and that can make you a bigot, then aren't you racist?
Wait, so when we say legalistic, and I want to just kind of clear up the air there. When we're saying legalistic, what are we saying? Are we saying that they adhere too strictly to the law? Because the law, we adhere to the law, right? But are legalists saying you are saved by the law? Or what is the difference between a legalist and someone that honors and respects and adheres to God's law?
So I think these days what people do is they use a form of, let's say, legality, meaning like moral issues, as a standard to judge someone. This person is a good Christian or a bad Christian. Not necessarily this person is saved or not saved.
Oh, okay.
But they'll say, oh, this is the ideal to go to this direction. And if you do that, you'll be labeled a legalist because you are going for these ideals as opposed to compassion, grace, empathy, mercy.
Okay.
Because those should be the ideals of Christians. Christians should go for grace and mercy, not this like path to excellence, not the path to perfection. And I would say that's kind of the direction or the definitions that people have been drawing up. If you're drawing lines in the sand, people want to draw that as a line, which is unfortunate because you need both. You need both.
Yeah.
And both are actually complementary. They are in line with each other. Grace leads us to excellence. Excellence makes us understand grace. We could always have the extremes where you can have grace without excellence, but I would argue then it's not really grace. And you could have excellence without grace, and we could use this podcast to argue that then it's not excellence.
I see. I mean, that's one of the questions that I actually have on the docket for today, just kind of the role of grace in pursuing excellence.
Yeah, but I just really wanted to spend time with those that may give us some pushback saying, or you may hear this kind of pushback saying, oh, you guys are so legalistic. You really are focused on works and doing your best, making sure that everything's perfect. What about grace? What about mercy? Where is that in your, service? Where's that in your theology? Where's that in your life? Because it really seems like you live a legalistic lifestyle then. So I want to address that. And so it's more about, let me just finish my thought. It's more about empathy. So you guys just got to be empathetic. And to be empathetic is to be understanding, is to compromise, it's to let go of certain things or not hold on to certain things so tightly as you did before. You know, you hold on to the doctrine of, what's the doctrine you like?
God.
Okay.
Oh, you mean like a specific one? Okay, yeah, doctrine of
Sola Scriptura is a big one.
Oh, Sola
so
Scriptura.
you hold on to
Okay.
the doctrine of Sola Scriptura so tightly. What about those that don't? Don't they belong? But they believe in the gospel. They believe in the gospel.
Right.
They believe that Jesus Christ came to die for their sins, and if you believe in him, they will be saved. And they don't necessarily believe in Sola Scriptura. You're the legalist because you didn't put them under your umbrella. And so you need to be able to, make your umbrella a little wider. Have them come into that camp of yours. Accept them. Be empathetic. I believe that's the
Right.
pushback that you could potentially receive by doing a podcast like on excellence.
I mean, I've even heard, just kind of going off of what you just said on Sola Scriptura, I've heard of people say, why do you guys, so strict, why do you guys worship Scripture over Jesus? That's a good one.
Yeah, doctrine is so important because everybody holds to a doctrine, and this is what we will fight against and we will fight for, defend. It's out of doctrine we have foundational belief systems of our society. To say that we don't have a doctrine is actually insane. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Everybody has a doctrine. So if you say something like a recent X post that I saw was someone said the reason why there are red letters in the Bible is because it is more weightier than the other letters. Meaning the red letters are what you would see. Some Bibles will indicate this is what Jesus said.
Right,
so
right,
they're
right.
quoting Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So they would put red letters. They would have more weight than the other letters.
Right. Because
And so
Jesus said them directly.
Some actual
Yeah.
theologians and pastors have said this on X. So do they belong in our camp of Sola Scriptura? Can they say, this is what we also adhere to? One of the basic tenets of the Reformation? If they believe that.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if they believe that the entire Bible is God's word, and
They'll say that, but then these words are weightier.
I don't know about that one. So, I mean, I wouldn't agree with it, but would we still say that they're reformed, though? Would we still say that they are of good faith?
So even back where the reformers were, and this does tie in with excellence, they had debates.
Yeah,
and some of these
yeah.
debates were ferocious. I mean, not just between Luther and the church at the time, but even amongst reformers. Reformers would visit each other and they would kind of talk to each other. And that way they would,
Yeah.
sharpen each other.
Yeah.
Remember we even talked about, I believe it was Knox.
Visiting Calvin. Yeah.
About the lawn bowling.
Oh, yeah. Lawn bowling was a big thing.
Yeah, and
Big
then
time.
That was a point of, I suppose, difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perhaps potential contention, because how do you keep the Sabbath then? And so if you're like, look at these legalists fight over every single minutia, every dot and tittle of what they believe to be the law. The reformers were like that. So obviously, by calling them a legalist, you're much better than these guys. You're much better than Knox. You're much better than Calvin. You're much better than Luther, I think is the point. I believe that a lot of people believe that now with this doctrine of empathy that they hold on to, that they are superior in everything that has come before them, or everything that has come before them has put them on this trajectory to be where they are now. This is very similar to Webb's trajectory theory, where everything is progressing, the church is progressing. So we have progressed out of Scriptura alone to now even something greater. We'll take verses like when Jesus says, you'll do things even greater than these, right? And then so they'll say that to mean whatever we saw in the Bible, we'll do even greater things. That's
Yeah.
why the whole charismatic movement is big on that statement.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we'll do even more miracles than what
Yeah.
Jesus did,
Yeah.
as if that's what Jesus meant.
Yeah, I guess conclusion for me is there's some crazy dudes out there. That's what I got out of it. But I'm sure our listeners got more out of it.
See, I wanted this rat-tat-tat,
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that.
so I'm giving you the rat, and there's no tat-tat.
That was a rat tat tat. Why my tat tat?
Give me something. Give me a tat then.
I agree. No, I recently had this conversation actually with a friend concerning this. The whole idea of Reformed conservatives loving Scripture and worshiping Scripture over and above Christ was something that was new to me. That's a crazy accusation.
Where do we find Christ? I think that's the question that people are posed with. If it's not Christ of the Word, then where do we find Christ? Maybe
Yeah.
in your heart, maybe in tradition, maybe in somewhere in the ether. You got him in a vision. That's the true Christ,
Yeah.
and things like that. And so I do believe that people have been pushed to this. So it didn't just come out of the blue, and all of a sudden people are believing this. It's come up because of these other doctrines that the evangelical circle has actually been accepting. So the evangelical circle hasn't been debating over, these are the fine lines that we should draw. It's like, who else can we put in? Who else can we gather in? We have a word for that. It's called ecumenicalism. Mm-hmm. And this kind of ecumenism is where we try to fit as many people as possible. That's why we'll have councils, and we'll have, current modern day councils, not like the Jerusalem Council, but modern day councils where we'll try to get people from every other denomination or belief system even. And now these ecumenical societies aren't just Christian. Like when I was working for the New York City Council of Churches, we invited rabbis and imams to our events. Mm-hmm. And so that was back in 2007. So that was a long time ago. Even back then, people were saying, we got to do more work with non-Christians. So we should find some common ground between everybody. And, what's wrong with that? I think that's the pushback people will give. What's wrong with that? Why wouldn't we try to work with people like our neighbors?
Yeah.
Yeah, why wouldn't we want to try to help society by seeing where we have common ground and doing good with that? Because that is the argument. And one of the things I always respond with, well, what are the weaknesses then? What are the cons? If you're saying that's a pro, give me a con, because at least then we could watch out for the con. Great, we have a pro, give me a con. What's the con? The con is we haven't been developing or adhering to our own doctrines. We've been loosening our doctrines more and more. And now every time we don't loosen, we try to go back. And this is where the word conservative comes in. We want to conserve what has been true, what has been in the Bible. Then we're being labeled. By Christians, you label them legalists, but non-Christians, you call them bigots. They're the same thing. Mm-hmm. When a Christian calls you legalist, it's the same thing as a secularist calling you a bigot. Mm. And so it's just different terminologies from different groups. But they mean to say that your tent is not big enough for everybody, and thereby you are going against your own doctrine that you profess. Love your neighbor. You're not loving your neighbor, bro. You're not loving as Jesus commanded you to love by adhering to those doctrines. And so I do believe that Christians today, we need to have a defense for why we believe certain things and why we don't accept certain things, why we can't put certain things under our tent or under the umbrella of evangelicalism. Now, evangelicalism doesn't mean anything because we started adopting everybody. Just as I would say this Reformed Baptist movement. And by the way, I love our Reformed Baptist brothers, but you have to understand that if you're talking about the historical context, there was no such thing until modern day.
The Baptist.
Reformed Baptist.
Oh, yes.
It wasn't a thing because to be Reformed meant to be pedo, meant to be Presbyterian. It went in that line.
Yeah.
And so
Paedo is Paedo Baptist. Yeah.
Paedo came before Presbyterianism. And then that was right after Reformed. And so the Reformed kind of branched out, not into Paedo, but Credo, and to the Baptist. So this is a completely different line. But, we could have a debate with our beloved Reformed Baptist brothers and sisters about this. I would enjoy that. One of the things that I do love about them is that they are actually a very powerful force for the Reformation and what we still stand for. So I love that. And, like you said, all the big boys are Baptists now. All the big boy Reformed guys are Baptists. And I do believe it's because of Presbyterian culture, though. Presbyterian culture is, we so to speak, we stay in our lane. Mm-hmm. We just do the grind. Mm-hmm. Day in, day out, pulpit in, pulpit out, preach the word. You know, I don't know if Presbyterian ministers necessarily go out and debate in the public square, but they will say it from the pulpit what they disagree with, and that's even going all the way back to the American Revolutionary War. How Presbyterian ministers, they're the ones that were known to don the robe, and then right after they got off the pulpit, they would don the gun. That's what it was. And so you put on the robe, go on the pulpit, you come down from the pulpit, take off the robe, and pick up your gun. Mm-hmm. And that's how the Revolutionary War was fought, because who were the educated, who did the strategy for the war? It's these Presbyterian ministers, because they were educated. Anyway, that's where our country, that's how our country was founded. But, going back to now, that kind of history, it's all but lost, because that's not what we want to teach. That's the thing about, making sure that we keep our conversation always on slavery. We keep on talking about Juneteenth and things of that nature. Is we can't talk about actual history, where our culture came from, because we're always focused on the slavery part. So you're either, you're defending it, like, how dare you defend it, or you're against it, you're an abolitionist, but that's all you're talking about. You know what I mean? You can't talk about anything else now. Honestly, I don't know who would defend slavery, but,
That's a tough position.
But that's where we are. We people think like, oh, you must be defending if you're not for Juneteenth and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so you're always on the defensive if you are, let's say, a Presbyterian Christian. You're always on the defensive. So you can never talk about why you like it. Even, going to Paedo baptism, apparently Paedo Baptists are always on the defensive. Instead of talking about the good things about Paedo baptism, about, covenant theology, about what covenant theology actually is, where it comes from. It's all throughout the Old Testament. That's why we have the New Covenant now. That's covenant theology going back from the Old Testament to the New. How it has the same parameters, it has the same dimensions, but it is in certain ways. And what's different about each covenant, though, and that's what we kind of see, this kind of interweaving between all the covenants to now the final covenant or the new covenant in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about all that stuff. But instead of talking about it, we're always on the defensive,
Yeah.
And so I think that's true for Christians too. We're always on the defensive. Oh, if you're not for this, you must be for slavery. So, no, of course not. So I ain't got to celebrate Juneteenth. Oh, no, of course not. So let's keep on celebrating. And so if you don't do that, then you're not empathetic.
Yeah.
And so they'll hit you with a barrage of like 50 different things. But what it makes you do, it makes you stay on a subject that isn't really something that will make us progress. That's what it is. If you really are about progress, you're progressive. You were not progressing because you're always going back. And that's the irony of being called a progressive or a liberal or a leftist. They're always talking about progression, except they're always going back and making sure we stay in the back. Mm-hmm. And that is That's a bamboozling to which a lot of Christians have fallen for. Same thing with the whole excellence and perfection and legalism. You're always defending. And so we can never talk about the good.
Right.
Which is great what we do here. That's
Yeah.
what we want to do.
And so, I mean, that's another thing that I mean, the reason why we wanted to talk about this, this is actually an idea that Chinsuk brought up, this topic of excellence, is I think because, like you said, there is this battle between the desire to be excellent, which I think is sanctification. This desire to be excellent versus, doesn't God just accept me as I am, though? Why do I need to be excellent? In what things do I need to be excellent in? And I want to actually go into a conversation about the glory of God as well. But, as we're talking about this, so should Christians then want to be excellent?
Well, let's go back to the very beginning. In Genesis chapter 4, we could read from verse 3, verse 4, verse 5. Yeah.
Genesis chapter 4, verse 3 to 5 reads, "In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell."
There are a number of explanations or interpretations about this passage. I just want to explain it quickly. And if you heard from the sermon series, it is covered from the sermon that I did on Genesis chapter 4. But some people think it's because he didn't bring, a live animal. Why was Cain's sacrifice not accepted? Because he didn't bring an animal sacrifice, and that's what God wanted. But there is nowhere in the text where it indicated that God wanted an animal sacrifice. It's true, though, if God wanted an animal sacrifice, then that's exactly what would have happened. But in fact, we even see in the rest of the Pentateuch that grain offerings are acceptable to God. And the minha, the grain offering is acceptable to God. And there are, parameters around the regulations around how you can bring the grain offering. So it's not because it was a grain offering, Cain's sacrifice was not accepted. Some people are saying, oh, this is just pointing to Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And while it is, yes, is that solely why Cain's offering was not accepted? So you have to look at the text and look at what the text is showing us. Every single varying detail should stand out to us. So in the course of time, Cain will bring an offering from the ground. But Abel also brought an offering. But Abel's offering has descriptives.
Yep.
It has adjectives.
Yep.
And God receives Abel's offering. But this is how he puts it in the end of verse 4 and verse 5 that you read. It says, Abel and his offering, Cain and his offering. It's put together. There's a conjunction between Abel and his offering and Cain and his offering. So Abel and his offering is seen together.
Yeah.
Cain and his offering is seen together. You and your offering is seen together. When you are talking about excellence and bringing excellence to God, it's put together. When we go all the way from here, now go all the way to the end to Romans chapter 12, verse 1.
Romans chapter 12, verse 1 reads, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship."
So now that we have been given 11 chapters of justification, sanctification, of this process of what God is doing to us and for us, what he has done for us, all this has been laid out for us. He's saying now what you need to do is present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Again, the sacrifice and the giver of that sacrifice are always tied together. This is an amazing gospel point where when God ties Jesus' sacrifice to us and we become justified, that's the amazing part about the gospel.
Right.
But now that we have been justified, the whole sanctification process is going. Now we are to give our lives as a living sacrifice. Are you telling me then that any kind of excellence does not matter? It has been negated because of what Christ did for us? Or should it be that because of what Christ did for us, it now propels us to excellence? Meaning now because we have been given this excellent sacrifice, we are now propelled to holiness, what is acceptable to God, because that's exactly what Paul says in 12:1. Give your offerings now any way you want, because Christ already did it for. Is that what he says? No. Now he says, make it holy, make it set apart. That is where one word for excellence. Excellence is set apart and acceptable to God. What is acceptable to God? What is blemished? What is tainted? What is not the best then? Or is what is acceptable to God your utmost and your highest? And that's one of the things that we saw even from Genesis chapter 4, is that Abel would bring his firstborn and he would bring the fat portions, which would have been regarded as the best part of even the firstborn. So it's not just the firstborn, it's the best of the best is the point. So what you would have seen in the descriptive of Abel's offering is Abel offered God the best of the best.
Yeah.
But if your offering is tied with you, he offered God his best of the best, which is then tied to Jesus Christ's sacrifice for us. Because Jesus Christ is not only the best of the best of any of us, he's the best of the best of God. He's God's son. And so God offering up his son for us is the most incredible sacrifice that we've been given.
Yeah.
Now, in that kind of imitation, that kind of reflection in our worship to God, you offer God something mediocre? Do you say that anything that is of excellence that you want to bring is legalism? And that you think that now your offering is about empathy? You think it's about bringing trash to God and saying, oh, God will accept it because he's a God of grace. That is something that pleases God? See, it's atrocious to think like in this manner, because what has invaded our churches and our pulpits even is not excellence. It's God will understand. God is a God of mercy. What you do when you think like that is you spit on God's mercy. And I think that is the bigger atrocity that our churches have been facing. I'll give you a story about when I was a younger man. I was serving underneath a pastor, and I had the opportunity to give a teaching lesson to some of the youth that I was involved with. And I remember poring over it and thinking and reading days on end, even weeks on end, for this teaching I was about to give. And this pastor came to me and said, brother, you're thinking way too hard about it. You are, it's too much in the sense where the spirit of that admonition that I was given was, you're being too legalistic. You're pouring too much into it. And I remember listening to this and thinking, there's something that is inherently wrong about that statement. That if I were to give something as an offering to God in my service to him, and people get to listen to it, and I'm representing, the word of God, and I'm teaching it to people, especially young people, that I wouldn't take it with fear and trembling. That I would take it, it's cool. God will cover me. And then the response is, well, God's not going to cover you. You got to do everything by yourself. That's what people say. But I remember thinking, there's something definitely wrong about this. And this was in my earlier 20s. And I was thinking about that. I still think about that today. How many of us now go to the pulpit without that fear and trembling? And our initial thought is, oh, God will cover. God will have mercy. But there is no fear and trembling. There is no, weight that you feel when you get up on the pulpit, where Spurgeon would even say with I think he had 12 steps up to the pulpit. He would say, and I forgot the exact words, but he would say something to the effect of, God have mercy. God have mercy on me. But that kind of mercy, not just like, oh, God will have mercy as some lackadaisical way of saying it. But God have mercy, meaning I feel the weight of what I'm about to do, and I prepared everything that I can. But even then, I need the mercy of God once I reach the pulpit. That's a different kind of understanding of God's mercy. And, when we look at the offerings that have been given in the Bible, there are so many examples of where we would see God upset with people strictly based on their offering and what they are giving. You know, we could go from the widow's mites and the scenarios, circumstances surrounding that, to what people were doing at the time when Jesus would upturn tables and saying, you've made this house of prayer into a den of robbers. Because, you know, people are like, oh, you know, let's just do this, you know, for convenience. And how that went, the trajectory of that went to people just making the temple courts where the Gentiles ought to worship into a marketplace. And you see how seriously God takes offerings. And God does take offerings very seriously. And I think we ought to as well. And when we talk about excellence, if your life is an offering, what part of your life should not be excellent then?
So I think a lot of people, when they hear something like that, might feel pressured, which is not a bad thing. But someone could respond by saying, well, doesn't God look at the heart, though? I get that I want to bring excellence, but doesn't God ultimately look at the heart? And so, sure, you know, Abel brought the first of the flock, the fat portions, but it was the heart that God was looking at. And if we look at passages like Psalm 51, verse 17, where it says, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. Isn't the heart more important? So let's just say, you know, we were talking about bringing the best or excellence in worship. Let's just say I play drums and my drum playing wasn't excellent, which is like nearly impossible.
Which I kind of thought about, to be honest. On my drive here this morning, I was thinking about your trumpet playing.
Excellence.
And excellence, yes.
Okay, this is not going in the direction that I would really like it to go.
No, I'll let you finish though.
But, so let's just say, you know, I was playing drums and it wasn't excellent. It wasn't good. As a matter of fact, maybe it was even distracting to other people. But I had the right heart though. Like I wanted to worship God. I did it out of a heart of love and worship towards God. Isn't that what's important? Why are we stressing so much the excellence of what I did rather than the heart? Isn't that what the Bible says?
Yeah, I don't think we do that for any other area in our life except worship, which is, I think, the crime. The crime is when we think about any other area in life that we want to get better, we never think like that.
Yeah.
Even think about your golf game. No one goes, you know, I did okay. Like, you're just a terrible person in golf. You're just a terrible golfer. And like, I did okay. But most people that I know, even when it comes to the game of golf, is, oh, yeah, I hit, you know, 120. Next time, I think I could adjust this to try to hit 110 or 100 or get into the double digits. And when people hit the double digits, you know what? They actually tell me in church. It's like, today, I hit the double digits. Or just before, a brother said, I almost got to the double digits. I could have, you know, made this putt. We think about the excellence and the improvement to excellence all the time in the things that we love to do.
Yeah.
If you really love to do it, no one goes, it could be good. You don't love it then. You absolutely do not love the thing that you claim to love when you don't put in excellence. You know, oh, I love my kid. I'll feed her McDonald's every day. No one says that. In fact, because you love your child, you give your child the best ingredients possible. And when they don't eat it, your heart is very concerned for your child. Why aren't you eating this? This is something really good for you, right? So you want to give your child the most excellent ingredients. You want to give them the best of the best, right? Because you love them.
Yeah.
But apparently when it comes to God, it's just about the quote unquote heart. If you did truly have the heart of loving God and worshiping God, shouldn't it be even higher than your love for golf? I would say higher than your love for your child. When it comes to God, we present him with mediocrity and we think that, oh, it's the heart that matters. I think the only word that I can think about is the word atrocious. It's an atrocity that our churches have been doing this, and the people inside churches have been encouraged to live in this manner.
Yeah.
When we are supposed to give to God our whole bodies, present our whole bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to Him, as a worship to Him, who do you think God is? And what kind of worship are you presenting to God? Mediocrity? Oh, I don't think you know who God is.
Yeah. It almost feels like, though, because our society is driven by excellence, like if you don't perform at work, you're going to get fired. If you don't perform in school, you're going to flunk. Our world is based around excellence. Because of that, I think people might even feel a sense of, there's one place that I can rest. There's one place where the inner me, is accepted. I don't have to be perfect, and that's church. And I think that's why people might even have that mentality where when you come to church, you can take a break from pursuing excellence because God will accept you as who you are. So what does excellence then look like? Because I think, when we read the passage from Genesis about Abel and Cain, we can say, okay, well, if it's about offering and if it's about giving God the best, then I could be a cheerful giver. I could do that. If it's about how I am, in service, if I'm on the music team or if I'm doing, part of this, ministry or that ministry, I could be as excellent as possible in that. That's very easy. What about the rest of our lives, though? Like, how does that connect? Because I think people can say, I could be excellent in worship, but then, how does that connect to our jobs? How does that connect to our roles within our family? How does that connect?
Yeah, I think it really has to do with how you view life then. It really has to do with how you view life. Do you live according to you? Right. Meaning you are the ultimate standard. Because if you're the ultimate standard, then yeah, you will do what you think benefits you. Perhaps even serving God. If it benefits me to whatever degree, I'll do that. Because ultimately I am the standard. So I need to be this, I need to be that. I need to feel good. But if you live according to, let's say, coram Deo, if you live in accordance with understanding that you are before the face of God, then your life is different. Then your priorities change. But if you live according to just yourself, then yeah, it's whatever's uncomfortable you're not going to do.
Yeah,
just like when Moses went up Mount Sinai, he came down, they said, oh, can you cover your face? Because we just can't take the brilliance of your face. Because what he did was he was in the face of God. You know how God reprimands Miriam and Aaron. He goes, you talk to Moses, but Moses is someone that I talk to face.
Yeah.
And so that brought Moses' face to a point of brilliance where people didn't want to. Why didn't people want to take it? Because they don't want to live in the face of God. They don't want to live in accordance with understanding that God's face is always before us. Oh yeah, if he's an evil being, then it's always been scary. I get that. When you look at the Lord of the Rings and the all-seeing eye and, that kind of thing where the eyes upon you get scared. But God's all-seeing eye is greater than any kind of all-seeing eye that we would see in this world. God's face being before you is a much heavier thing than you could ever recognize. And this is something that Christians are to meditate and dwell on. I believe it's, Psalm 130, where it talks about you are always before me, you hedge me in, you're in front of me, you're behind me. Even before I was born, you knit me in my mother's womb. He knows everything about us.
Yeah.
Everything, our coming and our going. This is what the psalmist says. And he loves it. He loves it. You know who doesn't love that? Someone who doesn't know God. Someone who hates God doesn't like that. And so, yeah, if you are your ultimate, let's say, reference point, then yeah, of course, make church your resting time because that's not your priority. You are. Why is job your priority? Because you are. You want the money. You want the cash. Why do you do anything? It is because, we want me to be good. 139, right? Psalm 139,
yeah.
And so we want me to be good, not God. And so when we're talking about living sacrifices, it means I am the sacrifice. I am the one being put forward to then what for? To please the one I'm giving a sacrifice to. My life is to be a pleasing, fragrant aroma and sacrifice to God. I don't know if people think like that anymore. because we're like, well, that's a little heavy. I don't want to do that. Well, I have to tell you then, that's not how Christians have ever thought. And you do have to ask that serious question then. Are you a Christian? Are you someone that loves the Lord with all of his heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then loves his neighbor as himself? Because those two are tied together. Now we only see that second part as some kind of social justice thing, which is a travesty. But yeah.
But it's so tiring though. Like, is it so wrong though for me to just want to be a member of the church? Is it so wrong for me just to be, just middle of the pack? Isn't that humility? Isn't that contentment? Why do I have to be striving so hard for excellence? That's so tiring. I can't do that. I mean,
yeah, I think a lot of people do think like that. Some people have actually come from a place of hurt and they join our church because the church was a place where perhaps there was a lot of legalism. You had to do a lot of work to be accepted. And then they'll join our church and they say, I just kind of want to sit in the back now. Right. I'm kind of burned out.
Yeah.
And I really understand and I sympathize with people like that. And I want to show them grace. I do. But I do encourage them as well. When you get a little better, when you recover, come join us. Come help out. Do a little about this, do a little of that. And then slowly and surely, most people actually do.
Yeah.
The people that don't, I have to say that what I have seen is that they will eventually drop out and they will fizzle out. Because our life was meant to be a life of service. Our life wasn't meant to be just simple, what you would label as rest, but I don't think that's rest. Resting is resting in something. So if you're saying I'm resting, what are you resting in? If you're resting in nothing, that's not really resting. You have to rest in something.
Yeah.
So if you're resting in the Lord, then that looks like something. And people are tired. People are hurt. People have been injured. And then they'll come to the church for relief, for healing. You know what people do? People pray for them. People minister to them. People bind their wounds. We use things in our church like triage, where we would see who's the most hurt and we offer them support more immediately than perhaps even others. And there's all these things that the church does. But what happens when you get healed then? What, are you just going to sit there? Are you going to continue to lick the wounds that you've had, even though they're not wounds anymore? They may be scars. You're just going to lick your scars over and over again? Or now, if you're able and you're strong enough, should you start moving? And it's like, it even in the physical world, let's say you have, our brother Brian had surgery recently.
Yeah.
First thing I told him, and this is what his doctors told him too, it's because it's absolutely true, is you have to start moving.
Yeah.
You can't just stay sedentary, because if you do, your joints will just start locking up. Your body will become more rigid. It's bad for your heart. It's bad for your whole circulatory system, all your muscle groups. It's just bad for you in general. You have to start moving.
Yeah.
There's a time when you can't move. Yeah, that you should, lie down and recover. But even with a surgery like Brian's, the time of just lying down was very short.
Yep.
You have to start moving. If people have arthritis in their hands, and it really hurts for them to move their hands because they have arthritis, you know what the doctors say? When you get up, do some exercises, move that hand, open it, close your fist like this. Continue to do that. Even if you have arthritis, you have to move through the pain, because what's worse is you don't move it because it hurts.
It locks up.
And then it'll lock up and you'll have less use of your hands and your joints as time goes on. I would encourage those that have been hurt, first, yes, get that bound up. Get triaged. Depending on how bad it is, get the ministry and the healing that you need, get prayed over. But that time is short, my friend. It's not like 10 years. It's not like 20 years. It's just a few days. And then you got to get moving again.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will lock up. Your spirit locks up. What a sad place to be in then. Because once you haven't moved for like 10 years and you try moving again, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You can't move anymore. And that's the very, very sad part. Sabbaths for people like when they take a sabbatical, it's never like 10 years. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Even in the Bible, after 49 years, it's one. After 49 years, there's one, right? The year of Jubilee. And after 6, it's one. It's just 1 year max. People never take Sabbaths for like 10 years. That's what I have found too. When people that have been an officer of the church decide to take a longer Sabbath than a year, I find more often than not, they just don't come back. And I think that's the reality. That's a fearsome reality we have to face, or a fearful reality that we should face. That, when you think that, why can't I just have the church as a place of rest? Great. What are you resting in? Are you recovering from something? What are you recovering from? Ask those questions. And yeah, if you have been hurt, get the ministering that you need in your life. But if not, you got to start moving again.
So this call for excellence in worship, in our lives, which is worship to God, but I'm talking about in the worship service and in our lives, can seem again like something that's tiring. Can seem like you're pressuring people. So where does grace fit into all of this? And because, like, let's just say that I am trying to be excellent, and let's just say I'm trying to be an excellent dad, and that's what I want to be. Like, I want to be excellent in all areas of my life, and I failed as a dad. Where does grace fit into this? Because I think more often than not, or actually every single time, we are pursuing excellence because we're human. We are going to fail, and when we fail, I think people can go down this trap of just feeling terrible about themselves and just bring themselves down. And I mean, where does grace fit? That's not, because, today people are like, oh, you have to be kind to yourself. You have to be kinder to yourself. And obviously that's not kind of the narrative that we're trying to go with, but where does grace fit in so that when we do fail, we do pick ourselves back up? Like, how does that all work together?
Yeah, okay. I mean, we could go with one dimension of what grace is in the Christian faith. The Greek word for grace is
charis,
where we also get the word charismata, and charismata means
charismata,
Jansuki Bibi, gifts
of grace.
No, just gifts
of grace.
No, just gifts. Christ gives us gifts. In the Bible, it's translated from that word. And the root word of gift is grace. Mm-hmm. When Paul is going through a difficult season, God shows him that his grace is sufficient for him. Grace is in line with excellence as far as it's Jesus who gives us gifts according to his wisdom, according to his grace, in other words. It's what we have been given. It's not what we deserve, obviously, but it's what we have been given because of the graciousness of the giver, who is Jesus Christ. So you have been given grace. And because you have been given grace, you can now act. You can now move. You can now do all these things. You can, supply the body with what it needs. You can be a member of the body and act in accordance with what that member should be doing. If it's the hand, it will do things that the hand should do. If it's a feet, it will do things that the feet should do. If it's the body or the torso, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That's the gifts. These are the gifts that we have been given. That's how grace is involved. But now we take grace to mean like, can't you just let this one slide?
Yeah.
I don't think that's what grace means. I think we've added our own dimension to what grace means. Grace, the word charis, is a gift that has been given to us that we do not deserve. And if you've been given a gift that you don't deserve, naturally the first thing that would happen is you would respond with gratitude. And that response in gratitude would lead to thanksgiving. It leads to worship. It leads to action, because that's what a response is. But now we think grace to mean like, I don't know, can I just sit on my butt
Like, show me some grace.
Yeah, show me some grace.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly like that. But that's not the original meaning of grace or charis. And I think we've kind of, in a sense, bastardized the word
Oh, yeah.
to just mean whatever we want it to mean. Meaning, when we say "show me some grace" or "can we show a little grace here," it means let me do what I want. That's what it essentially means.
Yeah. Or let me
do what I
fail.
want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could fail. Absolutely. You may not reach the perfection that you desire all the time. All the time. What does that mean then? You're satisfied? You're complacent in that? I don't think anybody that loves anything would be complacent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to hit upon, because you mentioned it before, what about then not just legalism, but what about doing that for the self? Because you could be competitive for the self.
Yep.
And you could be just, I want to do what is excellent because you want to look good yourself. And there is a level of, there is that dimension of pride that could be there. I think that is also dangerous. So you could be or strive for excellence because you want to look the best. Maybe you love the game of golf because you just want to be better than everybody.
Yeah.
That is also a bad thing, because again, go back to coram Deo, go back to the face of God and how we are to live in the face of God. Then the self will be so minuscule.
Yeah.
Because who is God compared to you? Where are you in this whole picture? If you give everything to God, then are you proud of yourself? Can you prop yourself up? Or do you see how gracious God is to you in your life? That He has even given you to the extent that you have. And that would lead you to even more gratitude. That would lead you to even more, in a sense, excellence.
So I'm just curious. So it seems like this path of excellence is a very narrow path. Meaning, on the one hand, you have pride that can result as a motivator and as the result of being excellent. On the other hand, you have laziness. You don't even want to do it. You want to just be mediocre. You want to just be whatever. And so there's that aspect where you're not understanding who you're living for and why you're living in the first place. And in the middle, in that very narrow path, is this path of pursuing excellence for the sake of God's glory, sanctification, right? And throughout all of this, we show ourselves grace in not saying, hey, you fell, it's okay, everyone falls, it's fine, pick yourself up. Not in that sense, but understanding what God has done for us through Christ. We understand the gospel message, and then understanding that God loves us and has forgiven us of our sins. We are encouraged and even motivated to, again, pursue excellence, knowing that it's not our offering, but it's Christ's offering that is satisfying to God. And so we live in response to that. And so that's what should pick us up, right?
Yeah.
So then, how do we do that? So, because if our goal is to glorify God, and then R.C. Sproul says this, he says the legitimate motive for excellence is to seek achievement for the end to glorify God. So all of this is to glorify God. What does that mean? If we want to excel to glorify God, what does that mean? So for example, you mentioned golf a couple times. What does me being good at golf have to do anything with the glory of God? What does me doing well at work, making more sales than any other person, and me just trying my best and being excellent in what I do have to do with glorifying God? What does me being excellent in school, in the gym, in my relationships, what does that have to do with glorifying God? How do we think through that?
I think this is a longer conversation, to be honest, because with each single discipline, you could go really deep. And that's the beauty of the world that God has created for us. Let's even talk about golf. Just because you want to be excellent in golf doesn't mean you're always in golf, right? Sometimes you have to relax. Sometimes you have to loosen your shoulders.
Right.
It's about twisting, making sure your torso is actually turning instead of your arms doing the work, especially when you chip. All these things come into play, and that's why you need to loosen up a little bit. You can't have your arms always in tension, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And people, it's not just about being like, oh, but then the point is the word discipline. Discipline comes from the word disciple. If you really want to be a disciple of Christ, you need to be disciplined. And in that discipline, this is where Paul would even say to the church in Corinth, I discipline my body and keep it under control.
Yeah.
It's about discipline. In that same letter, he says, run that you may obtain the prize. We even went over in our retreat the passage where, you're supposed to continue to run and be poured out like a drink offering. That was the ideal, right? Mm-hmm. That Paul was showing Timothy, being poured out like a drink offering. Just give it everything that you have. And I think that is the spirit of what we are to see. How does it glorify God? It's from your character, it's from your spirit that everything else kind of starts to show. So everything that we see in the outside, I think this is where, the question may confuse people, because we may think and mistakenly think that it's from the outside that, then we'll start to forge our character. It's the character that starts to show in everything. So because you have this character and this heart, and your heart is circumcised, the outside shows. If the outside is just circumcised, it doesn't necessarily mean the heart is circumcised. This is what Paul was getting at as well, right, with circumcision. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that our heart is circumcised, our character is changed, and then the excellence pours out to everything that we have. So it doesn't matter if I'm just playing golf leisurely. The character is showing. And it can show and be displayed in different ways. I know some excellent golfers who play completely different than other excellent golfers. Their mentality in the game is different. But the point is, the character of excellence, they still have that, right? So it can be displayed, with varying degrees or in different dimensions, or it could take on a different look in different people. I get that. But, the point is the inside first. And that's why, Paul tells the Corinthians, run that you may obtain the prize. How are you running? How are you doing anything? Is it so that you would obtain the prize? When are you not running then? When are you taking a break? When do you put that to the side? You know what? This running to obtain the prize? Let me put that to the side so that I can play golf. Is that different now? That's why in everything that we do, like the quote you read from Sprandolf, is that you would do everything in accordance with the ultimate goal that we have been presented. Running to obtain the prize, doing everything to the glory of God, doing it for the excellence so that our lives are a holy offering. They're all connected. They're all the same in that sense.
Yeah.
And so whether it's a podcast that we do, whether it's a sermon that you would give from the pulpit, whether it's even listening to the sermon, that heart of excellence is still there. And sadly, I want to bring it back to that original point. Sadly, what Christians are now saying is legalism is our biggest trouble. I don't think so. I don't think, looking at our culture today, I think I would have a different assessment of culture than you do, brother or sister. I do not think legalism is what we are faced with today. In fact, it's not adhering to the Bible and adhering to some other standard that, that you are facing. And you can be legalistic in another standard, but definitely not. We're not fighting for the standards of the Bible these days. So I do not think that's the issue.
So what you're saying then is, stuff like golf, work, whatever other, areas of areas that we mentioned in which you could be excellent is a reflection of your character.
Yeah, and you could say this is a test of our culture today.
Yeah.
If there really are true Christians out there, and you understood this, I think it's a basic concept of excellence that you bring out, it would come forth from your life. Where do you see it in society? Where do you see it in governance? Where are these true Christian leaders of excellence in our government? What about art? Do you see art pieces that are being produced by Christians who understand that this is a sacrifice that we give to the Lord that is holy and acceptable to Him. But you could look in the past, you could look at pieces in the past, and you could look at Rembrandt, and you could look at these things, and you could be like, this person thought about the Bible a lot.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it shows in the pieces that he drew and painted, right?
Yeah.
What about other places like science? What about other places in our society? The arts, the sciences, government and municipality, in places of authority, places of leadership. What about the home? What about schooling and education? Where is the excellence in that? We don't see that stuff because what have we prioritized instead of that? I want to go back to that. We think that empathy is excellence. It's not, my friend. It's not. We think that, we just need to be kind, whatever that means in today's definition, to one another. Kindness is the fruit of the Spirit. Being kind to one another is something that we have been commanded to do. But the way we have been described kind to is not just being nice, just being accepting, that's not kindness at all. That is being mean. When you know someone is sinning, rebelling against God, and you're just like, it's okay, man, it's okay. God accepts you for who you are. And we say some kind of weirdo, nonsensical platitude like that. If God accepted us as who we are, then there is no need for a Savior. There is no need for Jesus. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
God does not accept us as who we are. That's why we need Jesus.
And I think this is a good reminder, because something that, I've been thinking about, even with the complacency episodes that we did for the past 2 weeks, is just this idea that as Christians, we need to not be lazy. We can't be complacent. We can't ride it out. We have to be excellent in all areas that God has called us to.
Yeah, I really want good story writers.
Yeah.
I talked about this on the Wednesday session that we did, but Tolkien, Lewis Carroll, right? The guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
All these excellent writers that have written pieces. Shakespeare.
Yang.
I don't know what Yang has written, but
Most Wonderful
I can't
Gift.
wait to read some of his writings. I think he did a children's story once.
That's just step one.
But
Can't
that's
wait.
the point. Like, be excellent. You got to keep on producing.
Yeah.
Produce, and do it for the Lord. Don't do it for your own glory or your own fame. That's vain. That's vanity. But where are they? I mean, is it any wonder that the stories that we are seeing in Hollywood and in Disney, they are just utter trash? All these people are now complaining about Star Wars, the new Acolyte series, and Rotten Tomatoes has the audience score at like 16. It's like the lowest Star Wars has ever been. And I'm looking at the progression of it's not just a dumpster fire. It's a dumpster fire that's thrown in a pile of dog doo-doo.
That's tough.
It's just terrible right now. That's what it is. And the responses that I see isn't, we'll try to write better stories. It's, you don't like it because you don't like strong women leads.
Yeah.
And you're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? One of my favorite Star Wars movies in modern day has
Rebel
been
One.
Rogue One. Rebel One.
What's
It's
Rebel
close,
One?
Close. Rebel One is something else. But that was close. I'm glad you're trying to associate.
I love
but
Star Wars.
It's Rogue One. Rogue One, powerful woman lead.
Yeah.
One of the best modern Star Wars movies or anything that's been written. We don't see us complaining about that, right?
She's the Jedi, right? The powerful with Kylo Ren.
No, it's completely
Who's
different.
Rogue One then?
Yeah,
I thought it was who was the Rogue One?
it's okay. It's. I mean, if you're not a Star Wars fan,
I am,
you're
though.
right there with Sam. It's fine. But the point is, people are complaining about bad stories, and why can't we just get a good story? Let me tell you why. It's not about excellence for you guys anymore. It's about pushing a narrative that isn't even remotely related to reality. It's just pushing a narrative, and you don't care about excellence. This is why DEI is so terrible.
Yeah.
It's not about excellence. It's about diversity. No, diversity is not above excellence. Excellence is above all. And so when you think diversity is equal to excellence or above excellence, that's why we are where we are.
Yeah.
You know, why don't I just give, you know, my best, and my best is something other than what the Bible is showing us the best is to be. You know, we continue to change definitions. We continue to change standards. And when people don't like it, we wonder why. I wonder what was going on. So we have to, you know, say something weird like, oh, it's misogyny. You don't like Star Wars Acolyte. To be honest, I haven't watched it because I was disappointed with every single other Star Wars thing. So I just wait till everything comes out and then I'll ask people, what'd you think about it? And so even when The Acolyte came out, I asked a friend of mine, what do you think? He said, it's actually pretty good. It's not bad. You know, the Korean guy who comes out is actually, his English is excellent. Looking forward to it. And then episode 3 came out and he goes, I'm so disappointed. And this is a friend of mine that is actually not a hardcore Star Wars fan. He just enjoys it.
Yeah.
Every once in a while. And even he couldn't take the episodes because if it was anything, he would have loved it. He's not an anti-DEI guy either. So there's nothing that would have irked him anyway. But even to this person, bad writing is just bad writing.
Yeah. You know, that's why the Boston Celtics are so excellent. There is no DEI. There is no diversity on the Celtics.
There's no diversity.
Yeah, no, they're all tall. Like they're all above 6 foot. So there is no diversity. So that's why we're so good. No, we're not diverse. We're all tall people.
Does diversity anything to you then?
Does diversity
is being diverse any kind? Does it land on any kind of criteria for you?
Importance? I think diversity of foods at a buffet is important to me. Thank you for that. I think is a good reminder for us that we are to glorify God in every single area of our lives. And that although it can be tiring and it will be tiring because sanctification is a tiring work, we are encouraged by the grace that God has shown us. We are encouraged to continue to persevere.
Hey, what about musicians? Oh, man, we could continue to go on.
Yeah, so excellence in music. You love excellent music. You don't love not excellent music.
I'm just saying, like, the reason why a lot of people have been commenting and noticing there is no excellent music now is because excellence is not the goal of musicians even. Of what kind of rap music or what kind of, summer banger are we looking for?
Yeah.
Is it something that's excellent or something that just gets you hype? Because hype isn't excellence. And so that's not what people meditate on. You don't meditate on, Philippians 4:8, what is good, what is true, what is beautiful, what is excellent. You don't meditate on those things. You think about other things, and that's what's very sad.
Yeah.
And I hope people will come back, especially the Christian community. I hope we will stop messing around with mediocrity, thinking that's okay. And I do think it starts with what is most central and primary in your life. Isn't that the worship service? Have your worship services be excellent.
Yeah.
Bring up the best kind of singing. Bring up the best kind of music. Have the preacher go up there in fear and trembling and present the word of God, something that he's poured over day in and day out. And every single element should be presented to the Lord with excellence. The way you sing, the way you sit and listen to the word of God being preached and read, that should be with the heart of excellence. And so start from there and see if your life doesn't change afterward.
Thank you for that. I hope this is like a go be excellent type of episode.
Bring the most excellent offering even when there's offering time. Don't let your financial offerings get lax. Bring the most excellent offerings.
Yeah. Don't be a sucker. We should title it this. Yeah, because I think there are way too many of them. So, pursuing excellence. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And, if there are any questions, we'd love to hear them, because I think this is a topic that people may feel pressured by.
Well, if you feel pressure, then I'll end it with this then. If you feel pressure, then understand that this is tied in with love.
Yep.
Who do you love? What do you love? This whole episode of excellence is tied in with that.
Yeah.
If you love the Lord your God, you are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. Love him like that. And then everything else flows out from that love. Excellence is tied in with love.
Yeah.
And I hope people will see that.
We're going to quickly go into a time of Q&A. And this is like a quick one because we have a lot of things left to talk about.
What you got in the bag? What you got in the bag?
What you got in the bag?
So quickly, how can we honor our parents? So you talked about in the sermon on Noah and Shem, Ham, and why do I want to say Japheth?
Japheth is right, that's why.
Why did I think it was Canaan?
Because Ham's youngest son is Canaan.
Okay, yeah. I was like, wait, why do I want to say Japheth? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And we talked about honoring our parents. And I think some people may wonder, how do I do that today? I am a married man with a family of my own. I live in a very far away country compared to my parents because they live, overseas. How do I honor my parents? And I think just more broadly, how does someone that's maybe even beyond college honor their parents?
Start from the extreme and go up from there. First of all, honoring is the opposite of despising. So do not despise your parents. And then you continue to go up to the positive. If you don't despise them, what would you do? You would listen to them. You would take in what they have to say seriously with weight. So the words that they give you have a certain weight when you honor somebody. You would honor them, meaning your life has, to a certain point, revolving around them or their words of what they believed in, right? So you understand that.
I see.
Honoring has all these things, but it points to the Ten Commandments where you would see that obeying, loving, following the Lord your God, not having anything to do with idols or taking his name in vain, and then keeping the Sabbath holy, although it directly has to do with God, and now we indirectly are going with what God wants in our lives, the physical things that we would do. And the first thing is honoring our parents because they're the first authority figures given to us. It's about understanding authority too. So if you honor your parents, you don't exalt the self. You definitely do not exalt youth. And this is what our society is doing. People think being young is great. People think being young is everything. And as you age, there's a sense of remorse, even regret. Oh, when I was younger, I could have done this and I don't do that.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, now I'm being aged, there's an honor that comes with aging. People don't think like that anymore. Why? Because we don't know how to honor our parents. Because of that, our priorities have flipped. What we adhere to as, this is good and bad, that's being flipped is my point. What we acknowledge as precious is being flipped. And so not being able to honor your parents has given us all these detrimental effects in our society. So honor your parents, don't despise them, but lift them up. And do that the best way you can. That will be my short answer.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Moving on to current events. There was last week, there was a Louisiana law that was passed that mandates that all classrooms in the state of Louisiana must have the Ten Commandments displayed in every single classroom. And this is in public schools, elementary, and colleges, middle school, high school. That's amazing. But now the argument is, well, where does religion and government, separation of church and state, how does that factor into this law? The letter of the law says that the Ten Commandments must be displayed in large, easily readable font. And what is interesting is that the schools are not to hang up any version of the Ten Commandments that they want, but there's a standardized version. It is the Louisiana legislature version of Holy Scripture, and it's an edited version. So, for example, the Louisiana version includes the commandment not to make any graven images, but omits the warning against bowing down to the image because God is jealous God. And so it's interesting. It is the Ten Commandments, but they're kind of editing it on their own.
Well, it's like an abridged version.
Yeah.
It's what we saw, maybe not you, but it's what I saw growing up. So people used to have like posters of the Ten Commandments in classrooms. So even in some of my classrooms when I was in elementary school, they had the Ten Commandments up, some of them, because teachers could put them up if they want. And it would be this abridged, like King James version of it.
Right.
So it would be like, thou shalt not kill, right? Obviously, we don't see that in our Bible versions, thou, the word thou. But it is an abridged version. So I'm not sure if it should necessarily be considered an omission rather than an abridgment so that you can kind of memorize it. And that's what the Louisiana, I guess, the HB, was it 71, 74, something like that?
Yeah.
The House Bill, 71 in Louisiana has been put forward as. But I would say then it's great. I love it. I am more disappointed at these so-called Christian leaders who are against it.
They're mad though. Pretty upset.
They are big mad, yes.
Yeah. They're hot.
They are big mad because I think we are at a place where people hate God, even though they're Christian. And they'll use anything and everything to say, we don't want to force Christianity down people's throats. Yeah, that's where we are. Or they'll use separation of church and state.
Yep.
Or freedom of religion. This doesn't allow people to have the freedom of religion.
So my question was with that. So people are saying that this is a government-imposed religion that doesn't welcome other religions. So they're saying, oh, what if a Muslim kid walks into class, they see the Ten Commandments, and he or she's like, uh-oh, I'm not welcome here. Like, aren't we then saying that this is the religion of the school, and if you're another religion, you're not welcome here?
I think that's not what they are proposing. What their argument is in Louisiana, from what I know, is that this is the basic foundational precepts of our republic. This is what our laws and all these things are founded upon.
Yeah.
Which is true, though. It's true. Western nations were founded on Christian, laws. That's what it was. It wasn't founded on Muslim laws, Islamic laws. It wasn't founded on atheism. That's not even a thing. And so it was founded upon these values. The Western values are Christian values. And if you want to go more nuanced, it's biblical values plus what we saw from the Greeks. So the Republic and things of that nature. And so we meshed these two ideas from the Roman era and with Christian, values.
Yeah, I think this is great. People are very, very upset about it, though.
People are upset. I would say watch for the people that are upset. And I think you can kind of tell whoever's really upset about this is really scared that they might be labeled a Christian nationalists. So because they're going to be labeled potentially a Christian nationalist, they will do everything, in response to that.
Yeah.
So it's not about, this is good, let's adhere to it. It's fear that I don't want to be called this. I don't want to be labeled this. So I'll do everything in my power to not be labeled this, including fighting against the Ten Commandments being posted up in every classroom. It's good. It's great. Let's do it. I was like, isn't it imposing your religion? What part do you disagree with, though? What part do you disagree with? It's like, I don't want people to say they're forced to, believe that our God is the only God. Who said that? We're not saying you have to believe the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
We're going to post it up there because this is what our nation was founded upon.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the ferocious debates that even the founding fathers had. You could read it in the Federalist Papers. You could read what John Adams wrote. You could read why he thought that, we should actually overtly say in the Constitution that this is a Christian republic, and why they took it out in the end. Because they didn't want to say this particular denomination is the religion of the land, And so, but were they all believers in God in one way, in one form or another? Absolutely. Even the one that was the furthest away, which was Thomas Jefferson, he just wanted to take out all these miracle parts. So he wrote his own version of the Bible that you can see, which is kind of nonsense. And, he is labeled now as a moral therapeutic deist. But even though he was a deist, he saw the value of Christian idea and thought. He didn't hold to another value. So they knew that these Christian values were superior, and they wanted our nation to follow these Christian ideals, which is where we get our laws from. Where do you get the freedom of speech? Where do you get the first, of the Bill of Rights? You get that from Christian value, Christian thought. You don't get it from some other thought.
Yeah.
And so because of that, going back to say these are where we get our values from is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. But then people always try to twist it. You're forcing people onto your religion. No, that's not the case. Don't be bamboozled. Don't be tricked. Don't be deceived by argumentation like that. If you hold something to be dear and beautiful, we should hoist it up. Hoist up that flag.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. Heresy or not, that is where we're going. And you know what? I don't even have the
button right here.
It's right there.
Are you prepared to hit it? That's fine.
No, so I don't know if we'll hit it this time. So there has been an accusation made from...
Yes, it's a heresy. Hit that button.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
No, I don't even know what we're going to talk about.
There's an accusation recently made by you.
Me.
Saying that...
Your sermon?
No. We only do heresies. So this section should not be heresy or not. It's just be heresy or just heresy. That's what it should be. But today, I don't know. Is this heresy or not? And this is a tweet that we found on Twitter. I guess that's where you find the tweets. There is no good reason to send women to seminary. Now, we do not believe in women elders, women pastors. And we know that seminary is a place where elders are trained up. So, is this heresy? Is this true? Is this false? There's no good reason to send women to seminary?
First of all, let's
Seems crazy.
Right off the bat say this is not heretical to say something.
Okay,
like
just got to put this away now.
Secondly, we could take a nuanced take or we could just take the simple take. Let's do simple first. We actually have a staff member that is a woman that is going to seminary. We've had other women in our church that are going to seminary or have graduated from seminary. And so I think, if we just take it very simply, that can't be the case. Can that be the case? But I think what this tweet was referencing is seminary is a place where you send people in preparation for ordination. That's why women would have no business going to seminary if you don't believe in woman ordination. I think that was the point of that tweet, right?
Right.
So why would you send a woman to a seminary to get a degree when seminary's main job or the only job is to prepare men for ordination?
Let me ask a question that is not going to make sense, but I think some people might ask this question. What about 1 Corinthians 14:35? It says, if there is anything they desire to learn, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. I know that the context is within the worship service.
Okay.
But doesn't this mean that they shouldn't?
Worship service meaning what? Worship service is in public. So the public gathering of the saints. Women should not speak. And that's what he's saying. And he prefaces verse 34. I don't know why the verses have been separated, but their sentence doesn't start with verse 34. The woman should keep silent in the churches. The sentence starts with, as in all the churches of the saints.
Yep.
So this is talking about every single church. Women should keep silent in the churches. Does that mean they shouldn't prophesy? Absolutely not, because he actually encourages prophecy. So does that mean they shouldn't talk at all? Absolutely not, because how were women back then to prophesy if they weren't allowed to talk?
Yeah.
So what is this in reference to? And this is what you were getting at. It's in reference to juridical authority. It's in reference to holding some kind of judge power.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And so they should be in submission, because in judging, you are teaching. So when you teach, you are judging. When you judge, you're teaching. That's
Yeah.
the point. And so who can judge judges or, leaders in the church, teachers in the church? So that's what the speaking would have been referencing. So I think that's what you're referencing there. So I'm trying to make clear, perhaps, what might be confusing to someone when you referenced 1 Corinthians 14, 34, 35.
Yeah.
Why people might be referencing that.
Yeah.
So why is it shameful for a woman to speak in a church? Because that means you are at a place where men are not speaking. That means you don't have good men leaders.
Yep.
And it's an indictment on the church then for not raising up good leaders. And so that, we go back to Isaiah chapter 3 and all that stuff. If it's the rest of society, yada, 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 that's fine. But what does that have to do with seminary? Weren't you going to connect that with that?
Well, no,
statement?
I was saying that because I think people that may support this reasoning that, women should not go to seminary might point to that verse and be like, see, they're supposed to be learning at home from their husbands. Why would they go to seminary? That kind of thing.
Well, we could take a more nuanced take again on this one. It doesn't mean women shouldn't learn. They should learn.
Yep.
And it does show us an order of the learning, though. Some people now take that very extremely, meaning if the husband didn't learn it, we shouldn't allow the woman to learn. I saw this one guy. Yeah, I won't name him. But I guess he has some kind of internet following. And he says something to the effect of, my wife read a book on paedobaptism because he was Baptist, meaning credo. And he's like, well, you're not reading that book? Because I haven't read that book and I haven't come to thinking about paedobaptism yet. So you can't read that book. So he didn't let his wife read the book on paedobaptism.
That's so tough. Oh,
yeah.
man.
So,
Oh, man.
but I think people kind of just push us all into this one group if you are complementarian. That's
Right.
not true.
And that's why I brought this up too.
Yeah. So we can disagree on certain things, and I am not in that camp where if you're not pedo, you won't let your wife read a book on pedo.
That seems kind of crazy to me. Like a crazy person would do that.
But the husband is in charge. Like a priest is in charge.
Yeah.
Of the household's doctrines, right? So the husband should learn, should teach. And if he doesn't know something, he should learn then. And so there can be a discussion. Are you saying you can't learn from your wife? That seems kind of insane. That doesn't make any sense at all. I think you can learn from your wife, but I think that's where people are kind of like, oh my goodness, doesn't that mean she's a teacher? Not in this sense here. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You can learn from anything. I can learn from my pet. Doesn't mean pet's my teacher.
Yeah.
I can learn from my baby who's like 2. Doesn't mean that 2-year-old's my teacher. And so that's not about that at all. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's about who has been housed the authority that God has been given. That's what we are talking about. And it could be that you as a person of authority are less qualified than even your wife. Absolutely. We have leaders in our society that are less qualified than a lot of people. We always say that, right? But nonetheless, they are our leaders. They deserve honor.
Yeah.
Because God said so. Even the ones that you don't respect, they deserve honor. We ought to pray for our leaders, and that's what we do every Sunday. We pray for the leaders of this nation, of our society, because that's what has been commanded of us. So in the same way, your husbands might be actually dumber than you, but they have still been charged with authority of leading your household. So you pray for your husband. They're the ones that, have this charge on them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the point. Even in the church, the elders have been given the charge, and the elders are men.
And that's the reason why I brought up this tweet is because I think, like you said, if you're complementarian, you're automatically brought into this group of people that are also complementarian that may be saying things that are incorrect, like this tweet. And so I just wanted to bring it up because I think a lot of our members or a lot of people that are listening are newly complementarian, or maybe are learning more things about what the Bible says about the role of a man and woman, especially in the family. And so I wanted to just kind of talk about this to say that just because you say you're complementarian doesn't mean that you don't disagree.
Yeah, I think the word complementarian is also a new construct. It's in response to egalitarianism.
Yep.
So that word might fail us in the long run. What we just want to say is we are biblical, but that might sound condescending.
We're normal.
We just want to follow what the Bible says, and that's what we're sola scripturian. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think
Something like
normal is
that.
a good one.
Yeah,
I realize now because I'm saying that egalitarians aren't normal, which is true, but it's mean. So I shan't say it. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So is this like what is this like? Heresy?
It's not heresy.
But it's like not chill.
It's one of those things where you can agree to disagree on certain points, but you see where they're coming from. I don't mind if our women go to seminary, but if they go to seminary thinking that they can be a teacher in the church, meaning they have authority over all men and stuff like that, then that's blatantly going against what the word is saying. So that would be a problem for me. But if they are going there to learn more about God, because that's what a lot of people want to do.
Yeah.
I have problems about seminary in general. That's the point. And so I have problems with seminary. The concept of seminary, I have problems with. That's what it is. I do think that the local church should be raising up leaders.
Yeah.
And a seminary should be a supplement to that. But now we are just sending our kids to seminary saying, learn about God and learn about the pastoral role. And you didn't teach them nothing.
Yeah.
I have a problem with that. I think the local church should, and perhaps they are lacking in certain resources, and there are good teachers out there, let's say in Hebrew, that you can learn from. So that seminary houses a Hebrew, PhD, a doctor, right? And so you can learn from one of the best. That's a great thing then, yes?
Yeah.
But it's like a paraministry to me. It's because you have to admit your local church is lacking. And so if our local churches weren't lacking, then paraministries need not exist. It should, propel the local churches to, do better.
We should have a button that says, I see where you're coming from, but I don't agree.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe a different button. So this is not the heresy button. This is that button.
What's wrong with you people?
Which says the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's something wrong with everybody. Thank you for that, Pastor Gene. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.